Behind me on the screen, I have every single Tier 6 Mastery inside the game of Raid Shadow Legends, and we are going to be going through, and we're going to be ranking them today and talking to you about which ones you're best off utilizing, some of the things to consider when you're using these Masteries, as well as which champions to build them on. So let's go ahead and hop straight into it here, and we're going to be starting with War Master. So below me here, I have my phone, and to my left-hand side, I have where I've ranked them. So I'm going to be kind of looking around a bit throughout the video, but War Master is fairly simple. It has a 60% chance of inflicting bonus damage when you attack somebody. The bonus damage is equal to 10% of the champion's max HP or 4% of the max HP when you're attacking a boss, and the damage can only occur one time per hit. So that's really what differentiates it from one of the masteries that we're going to see later on down the list here. And because of that, it is going to rank inside the A tier. So it is a very solid mastery that I run on a lot of champions, but I don't think it quite makes it into S tier. And a few things to talk about the ranking list. This is going to be based on, obviously, the masteries themselves and how good they are, but it's also going to be based on usage inside the game. So we have certain masteries that used to be fantastic, and they aren't necessarily anymore. Or we have masteries that just don't really fit on any champions inside the game, right? Or masteries that are so incredibly niche that I can't, in good faith, rank them very highly. So we're heading on to the next mastery here, which is going to be Helm Smasher. Helm Smasher has a 50% chance of ignoring 25% of the target's defense, a very good activation rate, and a very good effect. For skills that ignore defense, this 25% is in addition to the defense that's already ignored. Excuse me. This is probably one of the most used masteries inside the entire game, especially if you're looking from a PvP scope. This mastery is absolutely incredible. It's going to earn its way into a very easy S tier without really any sort of a question about it. Next up, we have Giant Slayer, which for all intents and purposes is very similar to War Master. So it's going to have a 30% chance of inflicting bonus damage when you're attacking. The bonus damage is equal to 7.5% of the target's max HP or 3% of the target's max HP when attacking a boss. Bonus damage can occur on each hit of a skill but does not count as an extra hit. So this is fantastic. This is going to be for those champions that have multi-hitter A1s. So Newt, for example, Newt is fantastic with it because of his A3 as well. Obviously, somebody like a Xenograde Blade Master, Ninja on his A3, any sort of a multi-hit champion, and generally to average it out, you want their skills to have 3 or more hits to make it mathematically superior to War Master, because if they're all just 2 times hitter skills, generally, with a little bit of RNG involved, you are going to be better running War Master. That being said, though, for the champions that this can be used on, this is actually going to be an S tier skill. So in my opinion, or mastery rather, in my opinion, it does definitely rank above War Master because the champions that can run it are going to be absolutely fantastic in it, and you will notice a huge difference in your runs, especially somewhere like Fire Knight, for example, where once you have the shield down, he can be incredibly tanky, right? So having champions, especially Fire Knight, hard, because a lot of times there what you have to do essentially is go fast instead of damage based. So having champions that can do more damage with this mastery is absolutely fantastic. And lastly, from the offense tree, we have Flawless Execution. Flawless Execution is a very basic mastery, crit damage plus 20%. For anyone who's been playing the game for any length of time, you can probably guess where this is going to be ranked. And that's right, it is going straight into F tier without any question. I have only built one single champion with this mastery in my entire time playing Raid, and that was Coldheart. And I built her with this because at the time I did not have a crit damage amulet, so I decided, hey, I'm going to try and get some extra damage out of this champion by building her inside Flawless Execution. Biggest mistake I made, I remastered her. She performs way better now. This mastery is absolutely terrible. I don't think you're going to build this on anybody in the game, if you're building them right, at least, right? You could make the argument, well, I have a damage-dealing champion, and I need more damage. Well, if you need more damage, go with Helm Smasher. This mastery leaves a lot to be desired. I would say it's not even been power crept, it's always been terrible, essentially, and especially compared to the other offensive tree masteries, and once we start getting into gear ascension and those sorts of things, right, this mastery just gets left so incredibly far behind that it is really not even funny. We're moving over to the defense tree, and we're going to have Iron Skin, which is this mastery right here, and Iron Skin is going to go ahead and sit into a C tier Iron Skin. Another basic mastery, defense plus 200%, or plus 200. If it was plus 200%, it'd be pretty good, but plus 200 flat stat. The only champions you're really going to build this on are rares, excuse me, or maybe epics that have like no survivability. But if they're a champion that has like no survivability and you need this mastery out of them anyways, it's probably not going to be that good. And the reason you don't use this for, you know, higher end champions is because most of your legendary champions are going to have, you know, fantastic base stats. And then the champions that don't have fantastic base stats, so let's think about your damage dealers. Like, let's take a Sun Wukong, for example, right? You're going to want to run him in Helm Smasher as a tier 6, not some sort of a crappy defense boosting mastery. So it's just, it's kind of like Flawless Execution. It's just not good, but it's going to go into a C tier instead of an F tier because there is some actual viable use to it. You can use it on like a rare champion that you're trying to solo content or something like that, right? And it's another one of those masteries that I don't think has really gotten power crept. I think it was pretty much just terrible. And don't look at that if, you know, you've seen that there. I had to move it over to my main screen. It's just a secret between us. That being said, we're moving on to the next one. The next one is going to be Bulwark. Bulwark is going to decrease the damage all allies receive by 5%. This champion will receive that damage instead. So Bulwark is going to go ahead and sit into the A tier. It's a fantastic mastery, especially for PvP content. So you can put it on somebody who's in Stone Skin, and they're going to soak up some extra damage, right? And you run it with, say, maybe even like a Guardian set or something like that, like 1-turn Stone Skin, Guardian set. They're essentially just, you know, absorbing like, what is it, like 15% of the damage that's getting dealt to your team. You can put it on somebody like a Necrit, right? Somebody who's protecting your team. A Freya, if you're lucky enough to have her. There's so many champions, excuse me, burping a little bit there, that you can run it on. And it's a fantastic mastery. And it is just going to help your survivability a lot. And it's especially helpful if you're running a very tanky team already, right? And this does not seem to stack as far as I know, so you can't necessarily just run everybody in it, but if you have like an Ursuga or something like that, it's certainly going to be useful for helping you survive. Now, on to the next one. We have Fearsome Presence. Fearsome Presence is going to go ahead and earn itself a B tier ranking. Fearsome Presence increases the chance of placing a stun, sleep, freeze, fear, true fear, provoke, or sheep from skills or artifacts by 5%. And the reason that it's only in B tier is, what is the use, right? The use is essentially that you'll go ahead and put it on a champion who's in a stun set, so you'll have a 23% chance of placing the stun instead of the 18% chance that you get by default. But realistically, when you're using champions in stun sets, it's because you're trying to clear content that's going to be heavily RNG based anyways. So you're trying to cheese your way through Secret Rooms in Doom Tower, or you're trying to cheese your way through some Centranos content, right? This mastery does nothing to add consistency to your runs, and it does nothing to really help you overall, I would say, right? Because the lion's share of the chance of placing stun is going to be done by the stun set itself, right? So this mastery is very useful in certain niche content, which is why it's not a C or an F. And I do think it deserves to sit inside the B tier. Next up, we have, well, the last one here is Unshakable from the defense tree. And this is going to be a simple mastery. This is resistance plus 50. Now, this is also going to go into the B tier. The reason being, again, it's very useful in some areas. So if you're just trying to hit stat thresholds, I have built out some champions in this, for example, soloing content or, you know, duoing content, those sorts of things. It definitely does have some use cases. For PvP, it's been very much power crept because we now have mythical champions that just flat out ignore like 20% of your champion's resistance. So resistance has definitely been power crept a little bit there, but a lot of players are still going to get use out of this mastery. So I think B tier ranking is very fair for it. We have Elixir of Life coming in from the support tree. This is simple, max HP plus 3000, and you can probably guess where this one's going to go based on all the other rankings. That's right, it is going straight into the F tier. This is yet another crappy mastery, in my opinion. I've built maybe 2 champions in my entire time playing Raid inside this mastery. It's just not very useful. Excuse me. If you have a champion that's trying to, you know, have more HP, there's better ways to do it. This is essentially the equivalent to having like a ring on them, right? So it can be useful in some areas, but for a tier 6, I would say there's just far better masteries that you can get, especially in PvP. PvP is probably where you could argue the most that you're going to get the most use out of it. But, you know, it's just like, what is the use? Where are you going to use this over another better tier 6 mastery? So I think F tier is very much deserved. We have Timely Intervention coming in here, which increases this champion's turn meter by 20% whenever an ally hero drops below 25%. A 20% turn meter boost whenever somebody drops below 25% HP is absolutely fantastic, especially if you have something like a Leorius or a Skull Crown on your team who gets the unkillable, and your Reviver can run this mastery and still get that turn meter boost coming in. Because of that, this is without question going into the S tier. Having this mastery on a Go Second Reviver like a Marichka or a Duchess or something like that, right, is absolutely sensational. Put it on a Galathier, any sort of a champion who can just be tanky, soak up some damage. Pytheon, for anybody who might have got the fusion. This is a fantastic mastery. Highly recommend it on almost every Reviver inside the game. The only time that you wouldn't really want this is if you're speed tuning stuff, right? So Clan Boss or something like that, just something to keep in mind. We have Oppressor, which is an interesting one. So it's going to increase the turn meter fill rate by 2.5% for each active debuff cast by this champion. Stacks up to 10%. Well, I'll tell you what, this is going to stack up to an F tier mastery. I have not used this mastery on a single champion on my account. Literally ever. Not even when I was new and I was like, oh, hey, this sounds cool. I've seen some testing done on it. I've done some testing on it. It's not good. There's better tier 6 masteries to use. Realistically, it's supposed to be used for, I would imagine, someone like maybe a Corvus or a Venomage who's trying to solo content, put out a lot of debuffs. But at the end of the day, there's just better, tier 6 masteries for those champions, like a Helm Smasher or like a mastery that we're going to talk about next, which is Eagle Eye, which is a very simple mastery. Once again, this is going to be accuracy plus 50, and it's going to earn itself an A tier ranking. So you can see we have a very interesting split between the support masteries here. We have an S and an A, and then we have 2 F tiers. Eagle Eye is fantastic. Accuracy is still incredibly important in the game, no matter what content you're trying to beat. Go ahead, use this mastery, right? I still run this on a lot of my champions, especially inside the arena. It helps to, it's almost the equivalent of having an accuracy banner on your champions, right? So it's like 28 points lower or something like that than an accuracy banner. But it's still so important to have those accuracies, especially now that we have mythical champions that have higher base stats. If we're trying to strip off stone skin and those sorts of things, just getting that quintessential, accuracy at the bottom of your runs is going to be so important. So this mastery definitely earned its way into the A tier. Do you disagree with any of these masteries? If you do, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below. I'm sure there's going to be somebody who disagrees with it, but I'm curious to hear your justification and where you would rank them. That being said, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.